Look, when a sitting French president hits an 11% approval rating, you know something's broken. And I'm not just talking about France. Across Europe right now, we're watching leadership credibility collapse in real time. Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer is barely hovering around 20% approval. Germany's Friedrich Merz just dropped to 25%, but Emmanuel Macron, he's hit rock bottom at 11%. That's the lowest any French president has recorded in 40 years. These aren't just numbers, these are political earthquakes happening simultaneously across the continent. And the timing? It couldn't be more critical, because while Europe's leaders are losing their grip on public trust, the power dynamics of the entire Western world are shifting beneath their feet. So buckle up, because what I'm about to walk you through isn't just today's headlines, it's the blueprint of how power actually works when the cameras stop rolling. Before we dive deeper, let me tell you something. I spent years working inside one of the biggest media organizations you'd recognize instantly, and I watched how they bent every story to fit whatever narrative served their interests that week. I walked away from that world because I couldn't stomach it anymore. Now I'm independent, I answer to nobody, and I'm going to tell you what actually matters, not what they want you to think matters. And if you're finding value in this kind of straight talk, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and here's the thing, if you really want to support independent journalism that isn't beholden to corporate interests or political machines, consider becoming a channel sponsor. It's people like you who make it possible for me to keep doing this without compromise. Your support means everything, genuinely. Now let's get into what just happened in the Netherlands, because this election tells us so much about where Europe is heading. The Dutch just finished one of the most intense parliamentary votes they've seen in years, and the result? A dead tie. Democrats 66, that's the centrist Liberal Party led by Rob Jetten, and Geert Wilder's Party for Freedom, the right-wing nationalist movement, they both ended up with exactly 26 seats out of 150, both of them tied. Now they're waiting for final counts, but this sets up what might be the most complicated coalition negotiation the Netherlands has ever faced. Wilders has already declared he won't let the left form a government. He'll do everything in his power to block it. But here's what stunned not just the Netherlands, but all of Europe. Voters gave massive support to Rob Jetten, a guy with virtually no executive experience, whose entire platform is the complete opposite of everything Wilders stands for. And why does that matter? Because Jetten is exactly what the European Commission wants. He's pro-green agenda, he's all in on every progressive policy you can imagine, and he checks every single box that Brussels demands. Democrats 66 champions climate action, liberal social values, the whole package, and suddenly they've tripled their seats. Meanwhile, Wilders, who's been a fixture of Dutch politics for decades, who brought down the last coalition government just months ago over migration policy, he's watching his influence potentially slip away despite matching Jetten's seat count. The establishment in Brussels is breathing a sigh of relief right now, trust me, because if Wilders had won outright, their entire European project would have faced another major challenge. So we're watching to see what happens next, because whoever forms this government will signal which direction not just the Netherlands, but potentially Europe itself, is heading. And speaking of European power players, Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz just landed in Turkey. And this wasn't your typical diplomatic visit. Here's the detail that caught everyone's attention. His wife Charlotte came with him. Now, for high-level working trips like this, that's unusual. Spouses don't usually tag along for bilateral negotiations. But apparently it was Turkey's First Lady, Emine Erdogan, who personally suggested bringing her. President Erdogan himself rolled out the full treatment, military honors at the presidential palace in Ankara, the works. So what's actually on the table? Officially, they're discussing the war in Ukraine, a peace plan for Gaza, and economic cooperation. But here's what Merz really wants. He wants Erdogan's commitment to take back Turkish refugees from Germany, whose asylum claims were rejected. That's the real bargaining chip here. Germany's been overwhelmed with migration issues, it's politically toxic domestically, and Merz needs wins he can show German voters. After their formal meetings, there's a state dinner planned with both their spouses at the presidential palace. It's all very cordial on the surface, but underneath you've got two leaders who need things from each other, and they're negotiating over dinner while pretending it's just friendly diplomacy. That's how power actually works. Back in Germany itself, police just conducted one of the largest operations they've ever mounted. We're talking 150 officers, multiple hours, a massive coordinated raid. And what did they find? A huge illegal laboratory producing banned substances in Brandenburg. A police spokesperson told the media, and I'm paraphrasing here, "We've simply never seen anything on this scale before. This wasn't some small-time operation. This was industrial." Germany's clearly decided to crack down hard on this particular problem. They're taking it seriously now. But here's something that'll make you pause. Germany just released statistics showing that enrollment in funeral services training has hit an all-time record high. Over the past decade, the number of people studying to become funeral directors has more than doubled. And they're not shy about explaining why. The population's aging, so demand for funeral services is growing rapidly. Last year alone, Germany recorded about 1 million fatalities. That's 16% more than a decade ago. And funerals aren't cheap. They're estimating anywhere from €4,000 for a basic service up to €42,000 for elaborate arrangements. Even anonymous burials, where no family members attend, they'll still run you about €1,000. It's become a booming industry, which tells you something about the demographic crisis Europe's facing. When funeral services become one of your growth sectors, that's not exactly a sign of a thriving, youthful society. And while we're on the topic of societal changes in Germany, here's another statistic. 22,000 German citizens have officially changed their gender since the new law took effect last year. Starting November 2024, Germans can change the gender assigned at birth, along with their legal name, through a simplified administrative process. You just file paperwork with the registration office. The available categories are male, female, diverse, and unspecified. That's the new reality in Germany, like it or not. These are the policies being implemented while the country deals with economic stagnation, energy crises, and migration challenges. It's a choice about priorities, and you can draw your own conclusions about whether these are the right ones. Now let's shift to France, because things are heating up there too. Police just made 5 new arrests connected to that massive Louvre robbery that happened back on October 19th. You remember that one, right? So that brings the total number of people arrested to 7. At a press conference, the Paris prosecutor revealed that 2 people arrested earlier have partially admitted their involvement. But here's the problem. The stolen jewelry still hasn't been recovered. The prosecutor says she's hopeful they'll eventually find the pieces and return them to the Louvre and the nation. But right now, they're gone. Millions of euros worth of historical artifacts just vanished. And 7 people in custody, some admitting guilt, but the actual valuables remain missing. Classic heist situation. Meanwhile, French courts just wrapped up hearings in a case that's gotten a lot of attention, the cyberbullying of Brigitte Macron. 10 people are facing charges for posting and spreading content online that called Brigitte Macron a man, along with other similar messages. I've covered this before. It's been a whole thing in France. All the defendants will get their verdicts in January. But here's where it ties into something bigger. President Emmanuel Macron is now calling for much stronger regulation of social media across Europe. He's specifically citing foreign interference through social networks and their abuse as the justification. That's the official wording. Macron announced that France wants to push for, quote, a much more powerful program of protection and control in Europe than other countries have, all in the name of protecting democracy, naturally. And it's not just France. In recent months, several European Union countries have publicly stated their intention to restrict young people's access to social media, but France is leading the charge. And European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen personally supports limiting social media for young people. She's already ordered a group of experts to present actionable measures by the end of this year that can be implemented across the entire European Union. So when Macron talks about control and regulation, he's not speaking in isolation. This is a coordinated push happening at the EU level. They're framing it as protecting children, protecting democracy, protecting society. But the end result is the same. More control over information, more gatekeeping of what people can say and see online. And who decides what crosses the line? Well, they do. Which brings us back to Macron's approval rating. Because according to a new poll published today, Emmanuel Macron has once again become the least popular French president in the last 40 years. People are calling for his resignation constantly, but Macron just ignores it. He points to his election, says the people chose him. And that's that. His approval rating right now sits at 11%. 11%, that's the lowest ever recorded for any French president in modern history. To put that in perspective, Britain's Keir Starmer is just under 20% approval. Germany's Friedrich Merz recently dropped to a low of 25%, but Macron's at 11%. He's in a category of his own. Yet he's still pushing for more EU control, more centralized power, more restrictions on speech. When a leader has that little public support but keeps expanding government authority, you have to ask yourself, who is he actually serving? Now let's talk about what just happened in South Korea, because this might be the most significant geopolitical development of the week. Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping met in the South Korean city of Busan, and according to reports, they reached agreements on a range of strategic issues. Trump called it, and I quote, an amazing meeting. He is a great leader. That's what Trump told the world verbatim. In typical Trump fashion, he joked that he'd rate the meeting 12 out of 10. And here's what he claims they achieved. Xi Jinping will help end the war in Ukraine. According to Trump, the United States and China will work together on this. Interestingly, they didn't discuss Taiwan at all. They completely sidestepped that explosive issue. Trump also announced he's lowering tariffs on Chinese exports following the meeting. The question about China restricting rare earth metal exports? Resolved, according to Trump. And he confirmed he'll visit China in April next year. Now let's get into the specifics of what was actually agreed upon, because the details matter. The United States will suspend special port fees on Chinese vessels entering American ports for 1 year, and China will suspend its countermeasures against American ships for the same period. The U.S. will pause investigations into China's maritime, logistics, and construction industries for a year, and China will pause its countermeasures against the U.S. These are concrete reciprocal moves. Later, China's foreign ministry released a statement saying dialogue is better than confrontation, and that both leaders agreed to strengthen cooperation in various areas. Trump is clearly very pleased with how this went. He's not hiding it at all. His Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced that Trump secured a deal for China to purchase 25 million tons of American soybeans annually, with 12 million tons to be delivered immediately. That's a huge agricultural win for the U.S. China also approved an agreement transferring ownership of TikTok's American assets. It's expected that a new enterprise will be formed, predominantly owned by American investors. So TikTok stays operational in the U.S., but under American control. That's a major concession from Beijing. Now, how satisfied is Xi Jinping with all this? That's much harder to say. Trump and Xi talked for about 2 hours behind closed doors, so much of what they discussed remains unknown. But there's definitely a thaw happening between the two superpowers. Remember, when Xi visited the U.S. during the Biden administration in November 2023, Democrats treated him like royalty, practically bowing to him, but there was no meaningful de-escalation. Now Trump meets with him, and suddenly we're seeing concrete deals and reduced tensions. Whether you like Trump's style or not, and I'm certainly not here to cheer for him, you have to acknowledge results when you see them. This was substantive. The relationship with South Korea, meanwhile, is much more straightforward. South Korea will pay the United States $350 billion in exchange for reduced tariffs. They'll purchase massive volumes of American energy resources, oil and gas, in huge quantities. And South Korean businesses will invest more than $600 billion into the U.S. economy. Trump announced all of this publicly. Additionally, he confirmed he gave South Korea permission to build a nuclear-powered submarine, but here's the catch. Construction must happen at U.S. shipyards in Philadelphia. That supports American industry directly. According to U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent, Trump secured approximately $2 trillion in investment commitments from his Asia trip. It's all part of the America First agenda. Like it or hate it, that's exactly what he's delivering. And that's the picture right now. These are the power moves happening while most people are distracted by surface-level news. Let me bring this all together for you before we wrap up. We started with European leaders at historic lows in public approval, Macron at 11%, Starmer struggling around 20%, Merz at 25%. These aren't just bad polls. These represent a fundamental collapse in trust between Western European governments and their citizens. Meanwhile, those same leaders are pushing for more centralized control, more regulation of speech, more restrictions on social media, all under the banner of protecting democracy. In the Netherlands, we've got a tied election between a centrist newcomer backed by Brussels and a nationalist who wants to stop immigration, and nobody knows which direction the country will go. Germany's dealing with industrial-scale criminal operations, a booming funeral industry because their population's aging out, and massive social policy changes while their economy stagnates. France is chasing down jewel thieves, prosecuting people for online posts about the president's wife, and preparing to lock down social media across Tunisia. And then you got Trump, who just spent a week in Asia and came back with $2 trillion in commitments, deals with China that actually move the needle on trade and technology, and agreements with South Korea that funnel hundreds of billions into American industry. Whether you think his methods are crude or his personality is abrasive, those are tangible results. The contrast is striking. So here's what I want you to take away from this. Leadership isn't measured by how polished you sound at press conferences, it's measured by results. Europe's leaders are losing public trust while consolidating control. Trump's approval ratings aren't great either, but he's delivering economic wins and diplomatic breakthroughs. You don't have to like him, I'm not asking you to, but you can't ignore what's actually happening. And that's what this channel is about. Cutting through the performance, ignoring the theater, and looking at what's real. If you value that kind of analysis, hit that like button right now, subscribe if you haven't already, and seriously, if you believe in supporting independent voices that aren't bought and paid for by corporate interests or political parties, become a channel sponsor. Every bit of support makes a difference, and it's what allows me to keep bringing you this kind of content without pulling punches or sugarcoating anything. I appreciate every single one of you watching. Now go share this with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.